Hello everyone, so in this video I want to just take you through some of the features of one of my favorite 35mm manual focus auto exposure cameras back then. Okay, so this one is the Olympus OM2n. Now I recently did a video comparing this with my Minolta series of the XD cameras, but in this video I just want to give you guys a quick tour of the camera and its functions and its features really quickly. Now, as you can see, this camera that I have is paired with the super compact, super practical 35mm f2.8 Zuiko lens. This is G Zuiko Auto W. And again, this lens, or one of the main selling feature of the OM series cameras is its compactness. As you can see, I'm literally holding this camera with one hand, and it fits into my palm perfectly. And if you have a big pocket, it's gonna fit into your pocket as well. And this lens is also one of the more compact ones with f2.8 aperture. And again, if you're looking for a compact lens, 35mm manual focus camera, this should be your top choice, one of your top choices. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. So on the top of the camera, you can see a few different knobs and switches. Okay, so this obviously is your film advancing knob. So if you do this, now the camera is already cocked, and the shutter, if you release the shutter by pressing this, it's gonna release the shutter, and then you can cock the film lever again. And if you lose it, it pops back, and if you click again, this is the shutter release. You can hear that the shutter sound is actually rather pleasant and quiet, okay? It does have a metal clunk sound in this camera, which some people may find it annoying, but again, to me personally, it is okay, but you can definitely hear that metal clucking sound once the shutter is released. You know, that humming sound. But again, shutter is very, very quiet compared to the newer plastic construction film cameras. Okay, this camera, the bottom plate is actually full brass, and the top plate is surprisingly also brass. So as you use and wear this camera, it's gonna expose a beautiful patina, like a yellowish patina on the area that you might rub against quite often. And if you scratch it off, it's gonna have that yellow patina that's gonna be exposed. So this camera, the more you use it, the more beautiful it's gonna get. And so just keep in mind, this is a full brass construction camera, very, very beautifully constructed. So again, on the top, we went through the film advance lever and the shutter button, two of the most important functions on any cameras. Now, right next to it, you can see a exposure compensation dial, okay? So this one, it actually is very nice because it compensates in 1.3 stops increments. So you have a 0.3, 0.7, and +1, plus 1.3, plus 1.7, and +2, and you have the minus in the same increments as well, which is fantastic and brings this camera to modern standards, because most modern cameras also have 0.3 increments. So this is definitely a big plus with this camera for fine-tuning the exposure compensation. Within this dial, it's a multifunctional dial. You also see a ASA/ISO indicator over here. So this is your ISO dial. Okay, basically you press this knob and you can do compensation. You can change the ISO right here. Now you can see once you change the ISO, you have to go back and position the exposure compensation, because this is based on the ISO calculation. So if you have the ISO, let's see what's the minimum ISO available. Minimum ISO is ISO 25, which is amazing. The maximum ISO that you can set, let's just turn this all the way, find out the maximum ISO is quite long. And now this is one of the small downside of having this compensation dial with the ISO is that every time you change your ISO, you have to change the exposure compensation as well. Now, you can see the limit of the maximum ISO they can use is probably a 1600 ISO black and white or color film. Now, also with the limitation with the ISO is that if you set it to maximum, to use a maximum ISO, you cannot do minus compensation. You can only do +1 stops and +2 stops, okay? And once you do this, now the interesting thing is you can see you can still twist this a few more stops over here, but then you wouldn't know what exposure is this. Now, this is one of the limitations of this camera is that with the ISO dial set to 1600, which is its maximum setting, you have +2 exposure compensation. You have probably a +3 compensation, but all those are actually hidden. You won't be able to know what those are without knowing it in your heart where those ISO is going to be. So +3 is probably going to be at 6400 ISO. Okay, so you just have to use that, maybe more than 6400. This is 3200 ISO, like, and this is 6400 ISO, and this is probably, you know, 128,000 ISO, and it's not shown, but you're gonna know that it is there and it's a available option for you, and you can't turn it, you know, to minus. Now, if you need to use minus, you have to use one of the slower film settings, speed settings. So if you're at 400, then you have full exposure compensation control. Now, personally for me, I use 400 and 100. And again, it's most common film speeds nowadays in year 2025, okay? You don't have to go that extreme, but just know there are limitations in using the ISO setting and exposure compensation. All right, so that's rather long. Let's go to the next part, which is this hot shoe, okay? So this hot shoe is pretty cool because on the OM2n, you have through the lens flash metering, which you can see and know by those additional metering and contact spots over here. If you have an OM1, you're just gonna see one big spot over here. What's also cool with this hot shoe is that it's fully removable. So if I just turn this, I can literally pop this out and remove it for even more compactness. You can see how compact this camera is if you don't, you know, need to use flash, which for most people, you probably don't need that flash. So yeah, to further reduce the compactness, to enhance the compactness of this camera, this hot shoe is fully removable. Now, one most common issue with those hot shoe is that most of the ones you're gonna find is gonna be cracked over here. Now, my fix around, since I own quite a lot of OM cameras, is just put some super glues around the weak joints and re-glue them back on there, and they're gonna work just as intended. But you just need to know that those joints is gonna be cracked on almost every Olympus OM hot shoes out there. Okay, and so I'm gonna remove this. And again, if you need to buy those as replacements, they are rather available on eBay. Another common issue is those areas are prone to rotten, and you most often you buy those cameras, you're gonna see those areas are rotted and some of the pieces might have fallen off. So just keep that in mind, okay? One common issue with those cameras. And it does also come with a nice protector for the top of the hot shoe, which is really nice. Now move on to this side. This is your control for the power. So on the off function, the meter is turned off. On the auto function, if you look through the viewfinder, not sure if I can show you guys, right there, that's the auto function. So the camera automatically exposes, and if you change aperture, the rating is the exposure is gonna change according to aperture. So this is aperture priority auto exposure. All right, so this is your aperture in the front, and you change it rather conveniently, like some of the Leicas also changes the aperture in the front area. If you put it into manual mode, you can see that little dial is actually changed to just the indicator. The manual mode enables full shutter speed and aperture control. it gives you this very useful manual. So if you're within the center area, you're perfectly exposed. Your exposure is going to be perfect. So if you change, so I'm changing the shutter speed, as you can see, the aperture, and it changes. If I also change my shutter speed, which the shutter speed is right here, you control it by turning this little knob. So if I change the shutter speed, same thing, that little knob is gonna change in settings. Now you can go all the way up and down quite a lot. Okay, now you can see this is where you can do some manual exposure with compensation calculation in your head. But that's the manual mode, which enables the meter, but it doesn't do auto exposure. With the off, everything's turned off, so you know the meter is not working, okay? So you know the camera is fully off. And so quite intuitive, actually. And for me personally, I always just use it in auto mode, and all I have to do is change this. You change the shutter speed, it's not gonna do anything to the auto exposure function of the camera, okay? The only thing that might affect this is you turn the exposure compensation dial. And interestingly and very cool, you have a EV indicator over there that tells you, hey, your EV is on. Make sure you double check your EV and make sure the exposure is correct, which is really, really cool on this camera. I love this camera's little tiny detailed functions, okay? All right, so, and over here is your film rewind knob. Once you finish with the whole roll of film, and if the indicator goes to 36 and beyond, you gotta put this on the reverse. This is a film reverse enabling a knob over here. Don't forget that. And then you're gonna start rewind. One thing a lot of newcomers does not know is once you finish shooting and you cannot advance anymore, okay, they know, okay, the film is done, and they start just rewinding without ever pulling this knob. And guess what? That's gonna ruin your film in here. Your entire roll of film is gonna get snapped right over here. And that's a lot of newcomers' mistakes that they're gonna make. So make sure you finish with shooting one roll of film on this particular camera. You put it into rewind. Once you put it into rewind, it unlocks the locking mechanism over here, where you can turn and rewind your entire film back into the canister right here, okay? So that's one thing that you need to make sure, all right? On this, it's also got a battery check function, which it says check reset, okay? So you come here to the auto, and you want to make sure your battery is fully charged, and you just push it up, the red light would light up. If the red light looks very faint or it doesn't light up, that means your battery is dead. Okay, so make sure always have fresh set of batteries. Now, OM2n battery should last you quite a long time. It does not suffer the battery leak problem on the OM2 SP, the spot metering at OM4 without the TI indication. Those cameras actually had battery leaking issue. Even if you put the camera in off, they would go bad. So I think personally OM2n is your best bet into getting into the Olympus compact OM series film cameras. So yeah, so battery check function, you just push it up and the little light would light up. Now, this thing also multifunctional. So after you finish rolling this, you're gonna lift this up, and you're gonna lift up and pull gently. It releases the film door. So then let's talk about the film, the film chamber, okay? Here is where you load your film. You're gonna drop your roll of film here, and you're gonna pull the film, your fresh roll of film right over here, all the way here, and you're gonna put your film, stuck it in here. Once you stuck your film in here, you're gonna start pulling your shutter and have it nicely locked in here, and make sure those teeth are grabbing onto the little film teeth on the film as well, okay? So that would ensure you have a nicely locked first frame. Once you ensure the film is locked, you're gonna come over here, close the door, press the shutter release, and you're gonna of course, push this back in here. Okay, so your film is loaded. You don't want this popping out again. You're gonna advance the film. Okay, keep pressing, advance, keep pressing, and looking at the indicator right here. The indicator will go to 1. Once it goes to 1, you don't have to release this. That means that your first frame is ready. So whenever you press the shutter again, it's going to expose the first frame, official first frame of that film. Okay, so that's how this little thing opens a film chamber, okay, and how you're going to load your first roll of film. Once you're on 1, of course, you finish your shot. I would advise you not to cock the shutter, because if you cock the shutter and you accidentally press this, it's going to release, it's going to do an accidental exposure and it's going to waste a frame of film. And the film nowadays is rather expensive. So my advice is once you finish with, shooting the frame, do not cock it. Whenever you're ready, next time, cock it really quick and press shoot. That will be the best practice to do on all the vintage cameras. Same thing with Minolta. Like this shutter is so easy to be pressed. Like if you just do it by accident, you press it, it releases. There's no off function to prevent it from being pressed. So just be really careful on all those film cameras. Okay, so since we're at the back of the camera tour, once you release this, okay, the film strip the film light seal is right here. I put in fresh light seals here. Now, a lot of old cameras, you need to ensure that you have fresh light seal here. Otherwise, if you expose your film, the light will leak from all over and cast the light leak on your film, which is gonna sometimes ruin your perfect shot. So make sure your light seal is fresh and ready to go. Over here is a film plate. It's pressure loaded, so just make sure it ensures the film is nicely pressed against the shutter window. And if you press the shutter, okay, you can see the shutter being cocked. This is a cloth shutter. It will release it and open the shutter. Let's use a 1-second exposure on the manual mode, so I can show you guys what the shutter open looks like. Okay, shutter open, shutter close, shutter open, expose the lens, shutter close. Okay, so once the shutter is open, you'll see the viewfinder also gets blocked because the mirror flips up. All right, it's a beautiful mechanism. Okay, so yeah, just make sure you don't ever poke your hand onto the shutter, and that will for sure damage the delicate shutter system. I'll also show you the front. The front of the camera, you're gonna have just basically a couple knobs. You have the film rewind knob. Make sure you don't turn this when you're shooting, and make sure you turn this when you're ready to rewind the film. This is the self-timer function. Okay, so self-timer, you pull this down, and if you release the shutter, cock the shutter first, pull the self-timer down, and it is ready to go. It won't release itself unless you release this little cool knob. Okay, so I cock the shutter again, and you say, oh, I want to use a self-timer for a self-portrait. You have the self-timer cocked, and you want to release it. You simply push this. The mechanical self-timer will start counting, and it will make the expose. And what's cool is this is a fully mechanical operation. So if you cock it again and you want to release it again, notice the shutter button. Okay, so you obviously have to cock it all the way because sometimes the spring is on those old cameras is old, and you have to cock it fully to make sure the spring have enough tension to cock the shutter. Oh, guess what? Did I cock it? All right, so I actually forgot to cock my shutter. So, okay, let's try it again. I'm gonna cock my shutter, okay? Use the self-timer function and start the self-timer. And this time, notice the shutter is being manually pushed down by the mechanism. And it will pop back up. And that's how cool the manual self-timer is on this camera, okay? So that exposes the camera, that makes one exposure, okay? And we're at the front, and there's another interesting thing here, is the bulb mode lock button. Now on this camera, a lot of times if you buy it used, and it doesn't have any battery in here, if you press your shutter, the mirror will lock up and will not come down. And in that instance, you will have to press this to put the shutter into the bulb mode. Okay, so this is your shutter speed dial, which is right next to the camera right here. Okay, very, very cool. It stays with the camera, even though it looks like it's on the lens. So if I take the lens off, the shutter speed control is right here. Okay. Most oftentimes, the mirror is going to be locked if you don't have any battery, if you press the shutter, and you need to go into bulb mode to unlock it. Now, you see, it doesn't allow you to go to the bulb mode. Why? Because you need to press this to unlock the bulb mode. You press that and you lock it, you unlock it. Now you go in here. You go out, it will lock itself again. You won't be able to go into the bulb mode. Bulb mode basically means you're gonna press down the shutter, okay? And it will keep the mirror flipped up. And as long as I'm pressing it, the mirror is flipped up. You can see the film plate on here. And if I lose the shutter, the mirror goes down and the camera goes back to operational mode. Now that's the bulb mode. It only works, does it work in auto mode? Let's find out. Okay, so it works in auto mode as well. The bulb mode does not use any battery as far as I know. So for nighttime photography, again, put it on bulb mode. This camera is great. It doesn't use any battery for the shutter to keep open. It's I feel like it's a mechanical shutter in the bulb mode, which is really nice. Okay, quote me if I'm wrong. Okay, but my understanding is it doesn't need battery to use bulb mode. Now that's a little trick. If you go buy one of those used, the seller, says they don't know if the camera is working or not. Always try the bulb mode first and make sure the mirror drops down. Okay, usually it should drop down. And so that's all the functions over here in the front of the camera. There are some other functions that are not quite often used, which is a PC sync function over here. And with this, it's also got two nice controls, which is is a focal plane flash sync. One is a front, I guess. One is a slow sync, one is a regular sync. That's as far as I know what it is for. The slow sync will fire the flash at the end of the shutter exposure, which is going to create an interesting effect on some of the shots. And the focal plane or the front plane release which means basically you press the shutter release, the flash fires immediately, and it closes. And then the camera would close the shutter at the flash sync speed that is designated. I believe that's the explanation for those two settings. Quote me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm not using this for flash photography, but this is a PC sync cord for flash photography. Okay, that's everything in the front of the camera that we covered, and that's pretty much all the function of this camera. Again, aperture is controlled on the lens in the front, and shutter speed is controlled in front of the camera, but behind the lens over here. You don't have to worry about the shutter speed if you're in auto mode, because the camera automatically exposes. All right. So, and again, this is your focusing. Okay, if you focus in the camera, not sure if I can show you. The focus will change to give a blurred background kind of a look, and then make sure everything's in focus. This camera has got a split screen focusing, so once at the center of the two split screen, they will be misaligned. Once you focus on a plane and they are aligned, that means whatever is aligned is going to be perfectly in focus. You cock your shutter, you press on the auto mode, you set your aperture already, and then it's going to make a perfect exposure for your first shot on the OM2n. Okay, that's pretty much all the function of this camera. If you look on the bottom, this is a motor. Well, nobody uses it anymore. This is an auto rewind motor that you can turn this off and mount the motor on here. This is the battery door. You turn it off. There are 2 SR44 batteries needed in here. Again, they last you for quite a long time. Those 2 contacts, again, goes with the motor that you can mount here. This is the tripod mount. To take the lens off, okay, so it's the top button. Okay, the top button is to take the lens off. The bottom button over here is for depth of field preview. If you set a depth of field here, that's rather, small, and take a closer look. If you press this button here, it will change the aperture. Pretty cool, huh? So depth of field, again, is one of those advanced functions that this camera nicely integrates. And this is, again, the lock unlock lens function. You press it and you can turn it and you can take the lens off. Okay, the focusing screen is over here, hidden on the top. It is removable. So there's a little tab over here. You press that tab, the focusing screen drops down, and you can put a different focusing screen on there, which is, again, one of those advanced functions on the higher level film SLR cameras back then. This camera is very well designed, let's just say that, and it's super compact. So if you're a lady, if you have a smaller hands, this camera is perfect for you. Very easy to carry around. The only downside is it's slightly heavy, okay, because of the full brass top and bottom plate, full brass mechanical construction on the film rewind and wind mechanisms, and with a rather sophisticated electronic system somewhere on top of the camera prism over here. Now, something to take note is that this camera and the camera before that, OM2, is actually very prone to prism rotting because they used some glue that actually emitted some stuff that damages the viewfinder. The OM2n, I believe, fixed this problem. So again, this one that I have is an absolutely perfect model. Doesn't have prism rot problems and is working as intended. So when you look for a camera, you need to make sure the viewfinder is nice and clear. There are no markings and any kind of damage in there. Once you see that damage, it is fixable, but it requires quite a lot of disassembling. I do have a video on how to fix the prism rot. If you do find a model for really cheap and you want to fix it yourself, you need a few extra tools, but it is entirely fixable. So just keep that in mind. This will conclude this video. And again, it's a long video. Hopefully I went through everything there is about using this camera. So if you're thinking about buying one of those Olympus cameras, again, fantastic camera. I can highly recommend, highly reliable. Grab it if it's in great condition like this one, and it will serve you quite a long time, and it will put smiles on your face. If you have a camera that had problems, do check out my channel and check my film photography playlist. I have a lot of maintenance videos, comparison videos of film cameras that's already in there that might interest you. So make sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.